Okay. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session. I recognize most of the names here because you're my fellow COOs, CFOs. But in case if we don't know each other, welcome. You were invited through friends of friends. And first of all, let me thank Elizabeth Kostolansky for setting this up. Elizabeth has great experience working with Beth, our speaker. So I want to highly encourage you to speak to Beth and maybe Elizabeth. I think she might be available for references or to share her experiences. Um, she was a repeat customer, right, Beth?
Three times.
Not, right, not just twice, but three times. So that says a lot. And so I want to highly encourage everybody also to send in your questions through chat. Please don't be shy. We'll make this interactive, and then Beth will help address your answers. So Beth, let me turn the mic over to you, and I'll disappear and to
Absolutely.
your important messages here.
Okay. Thanks so much, Brian. I'm just going to hold on and change you to attendee. So that should be set. I'm going to mute your mic. Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon or good morning, wherever you're joining from. Very excited to be with all of you. And I appreciate the time that you're taking out of your day to connect. So let's talk about this whole idea of how do we empower our young adult kids, right? Wasn't this supposed to be easy where you send your kid to college and they have a great major or great education, maybe they have some internships and when they graduate, they'd have a job, right? But for multitude reasons, it's a lot more difficult than any of us ever predicted. And I say us because I also have a college senior, so I'm living this with everyone real time as well. And we have this kind of disconnect going on. Let me tell you a little bit about what's happening in the market. So 2 million students and grads are coming out of school every year. A majority believe that they are ready for work, but not all the managers actually agree. If you think about it, 2 years ago, there were two jobs for every job seeker. Now there's two job seekers for every job that's out there. Very, very competitive market. And I don't have to share with all of you in terms of the economic uncertainty and a lot of the changes that are going on right now. Unemployment for college grads, it's at 6%, higher than the national average of around 4%. And as we hear from a lot of employers saying, well, internship's important. But did you know that last year about 8 million kids tried to get an internship and barely half got one? The demand way outseeds the supply of internships. According to the labor statistics, that 4 in 10 of our grads are underemployed, meaning that they are not doing a job that they went to school for. They're doing something that they didn't actually need their degree for. And of course, we have to talk about AI. It is taking over some roles. It's creating a lot of, it's actually probably moving faster than I think any of us actually completely comprehend, but it's really impacting the early career, early grad job market. And we're just starting to see the beginning of that. So we have this disconnect where we have young adults that many of them went through high school and part of college through part of the pandemic. They're struggling to get a job. They're overwhelmed. They're not sure why they can't land one. Parents like us are thinking, I thought the school would handle this, right? We thought on the college tour they promised that this would be taken care of, and it's not the way we anticipated. And now employers have this decision to make that do I want to bring in someone that needs a lot of handholding, or do I just use AI instead? Or do I utilize AI to even screen for these resources? So we have this problem. So just a little bit about me, and I appreciate Brian's introduction. So I am the CEO and founder of Next Great Step. Our sole focus is to help college students and recent grads land the first internship or first job after college. And we do that by employing a very simple, structured, step-by-step approach that really helps them answer two questions. One, to understand what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And once you get some clarity around that, then how do you become the one chosen to land the job that you desire? I'm also the Amazon #1 best-selling author of the book called The Next Great Step, The Parent's Guide to Launching Your New Grad into a Career. And we have just celebrated 10 years of coaching thousands of students. And thankfully, I've had the opportunity to work with Elizabeth and her children over that time. And I'm also the mom of a college senior. Right now, he's a senior, and I have another son who just finished his last year of grad school. So I get it. I am living this. It doesn't matter whether mom knows the answers. They're still my kids. They don't always want to hear it from me. So my goal for today in our short time together is to really give you some insight of what is it as parents that we actually thought was going to happen, what our students and grads are actually thinking about this process, and what employers are expecting, which many of you may know that as well, being in that role. And then I want to share you some case studies. A lot of parents will say, well, I wish I knew, I wish I understood how this worked. Well, I want to show you a couple of case studies of some students that we worked with who went from very confused and overwhelmed into hired into the job that they desired. And then I'm going to leave you with some tips and hopefully some mistakes to help you avoid and do my best to answer your questions. And as Brian said, as I'm speaking, if you have ideas or questions that you want to ask, please put them in the chat. I'd be happy to address them at the end of the session. So let's talk about us. Let's talk about parents, right? We thought this would be easy. We thought this would happen naturally. We assumed that our kids would take advantage of all the resources available to them and in a university setting, right? Professors, career fairs, especially career services. Did you know that on average, only 4 in 10 kids actually go to career services? So not as many go as we think. We also think they're going to learn life skills like how to network, how to forge relationships with peers or professors. But a lot of that doesn't always happen. And now, even again, having kids that were impacted in the last few years with the pandemic, they're really driven in on their device and don't always have those relationships or not always comfortable talking to other people. We as people who are in the workforce, we say, well, you know what? I have a lot of connections. I know colleagues or executives at different companies. I'll just introduce my kid to one of those people. And by the way, I'm all for introductions. But sometimes those introductions don't go the way we thought. Maybe our kid wasn't ready or they took it too casual. They weren't prepared. And then that connection that we thought would help them get a job doesn't always pan out. And some of us also haven't looked for a job in 20 plus years, right? We have some very specific ways of how we think the job search could work. We might tell our kids, and maybe our kids will just roll their eyes at us and say, that's not how it works, or you don't understand. So we're not always sure about how to give guidance. And as I said earlier, there's this concept of, I wish I knew. I wish I knew how early the process started. I wish I knew how to actually give them guidance. I wish I understood where AI was playing a role. And the other thing, sometimes people feel like, well, am I too late? Did I miss the boat on not guiding them? And I just want to assure everybody that you're not too late. It's never too late. And I'm going to share with you some tips that emphasize that. Okay. Our kids come into college very enthusiastic. As a family, I know that's like a joint effort to helping them get into the school that they really desire. They're excited, they have enthusiasm, and they feel that they have, the perfect major, whatever major that is. They're excited about it. And as they start to progress through school, whether it's the end of freshman year, sophomore, junior, they'll say, let me try to get an internship. Let me see if I can get one of these internships that I hear that employers want to see so much. So they start with the device in their hand or the technology in front of them, and they'll just start applying LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Handshake, the school portal, whatever it might be. And they start to realize, wow, I'm not hearing back the way I thought I would, or I'm getting ghosted, or this can't be that difficult. So maybe it's a numbers game. Maybe I just got to do more. Maybe more is better. Or maybe I just need to trick the tracking system. I just got to stuff my resume with all the keywords or put my LinkedIn profile with all the right words, and that's how someone will find me. Sometimes it works. A lot of times it doesn't. A lot of times they don't hear back. They get ghosted. They'll get invited to apply for scam jobs, and they start to really question, like, what am I doing wrong? Or maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I don't have what it takes to get hired. I don't even know how to move forward. And we can't underestimate the impact of mental health on this generation, where 40% of young adults in this age group have some kind of mental health challenge, whether it be anxiety or depression. And how do they handle the normal setbacks of a job search with these challenges as well? And then they just become very fearful and overwhelmed and start thinking, well, should I just create my resume with AI? Or maybe I should use AI to just apply or mass apply. They're not even sure, do I just use it to cheat on my homework? But they're not sure where that fits. And they very often become somewhat paralyzed because they're so afraid to talk to people. They're afraid of not being the one that is desired for a role. And we have a generation of a very fragile young adults that are need to get work, but they're not sure how to do it. And then we have employers, right? And which many of you as well. And we know from all the headlines, we know they've scaled back. We know that the white collar jobs and the computer science jobs and consulting, and it's not what it was even in the last year or two. So it's even more competitive. And did employers though need talent? They might have, leveled the playing field, but they still need talent. They still need someone with skills. They need someone who can come in and say, here are the skills I have, and here's how I can help you solve problems. Very often employers will say to me, it's really frustrating because students and grads will come to me and they'll say, I really want this job because it'll be great for me. And what so many students don't understand is that they need to make it great for them and put themselves in the employer's shoes. And that's what employers really want to see more of. They don't always want to do that, babysitting, so to speak. We've talked about this in the past. I've had a lot of conversations about quiet hiring. We all know what quiet hiring is. It's when we know we need to hire someone, but we don't want to put it on a job board. It'll never hit a job board. We're just going to go to our network and we're going to ask people who we know and trust to say, who do you know? Who can you refer to me? So our kids are never seeing these jobs. The other thing going on is the new term that was in the Wall Street Journal the other week was job hugging. Because of the economic uncertainty, people are hanging on to their jobs. So the same type of roles that potentially could have been open for early career are not as available because people like us, or maybe more experienced, are hanging on because we know how hard it is to get a job right now. And employers still do want to see real world experience, whether it's through an internship or how you worked in a club or a part-time job. They want to see beyond just the grades and the academics. What are you doing to implement it? And how can you potentially transfer that to something you can do in our roles? And AI, it's a major factor. I think it is moving and progressing, like I said, faster than any of us can actually even understand. But we do have employers who are using AI to hire or replace. I think we're still all figuring that out, but they still want to know, even if the job is not a coding or engineering job, the questions that are coming up. And I just spoke to 3 different hiring executives last week. They still, even if it's for digital marketing or any roles, what do you know about AI? How have you used it? How have you used it in classwork or to solve problems? Because we all know it's going to be part of our everyday interaction as we move forward. So we have these 3 perspectives, right? So how do we solve for that? How do we help our kids to be successful in navigating? So I want to just give you the little overview of how we approach it and what it looks like in some real examples with students. So our process is very structured, very simple, kind of really in bite-sized approaches. And it really starts with, how do they even define success? What does that even mean? Does it mean that I have a job and I'm making money? Does it mean that I'm doing something where I work with my hands or I'm interfacing with people? Like, we really try to unhook a lot of our students from the expectation of what they think they're supposed to do, because they all have an idea of what they know they do well at. We just want that to kind of pull out and see what that is. So we help them to, what does that look like? What's the vision for yourself? Let's set some real concrete goals to help you get there. But the heart of what we really hone in on is this strategy. And it's really these 2 pieces of helping them understand, what skills do you have? And it's not saying that you're hardworking or responsible. Like, what's your skills? Like, I'm great at research. I'm a great communicator. I'm a great problem solver. I'm a great leader. And once you figure out what those skills are and the story that you can tell that you've actually done them, you can't just say it just because you think you're great at it. We really pull that out of them to say, well, if you say you're great at research, what kind of research did you do in class for a project, whatever it is? And once they get clarity on their skills, the rest of the job search gets easier because then they can figure out, well, who do I want to bring my skills to? What are the kinds of companies or roles or organizations that can leverage what I have to offer? So it helps them become more targeted versus that spray and pray mentality of, oh, I'll just send my application anywhere. Or when they say, I'll do anything for anyone. And I don't know what to do with, no one knows what to do with that. And as part of that, we then teach them how you differentiate yourself. And how you differentiate yourself is by showing how you can apply your skills and helping that company to solve their problems or meet their metrics and really putting yourself in their shoes. And we do this through kind of a combination of helping them talk about themselves through really targeted networking, and then all the execution pieces, making sure every time you meet with someone for a formal interview or informational interview, what your resume says, your LinkedIn, your follow-up, how you speak about yourself. It's really creating this brand that makes them feel confident. So let me give you an example of how we've done this with a couple of our clients. And I kind of call it, these are the wish I knew the case studies. So here's Haley. Haley came to us in the fall of 2024. She was very frustrated, very upset that she was not able to get a junior year summer internship in marketing. She went to University of Rhode Island. She really wanted a role in fashion or beauty, and she felt she did what she was supposed to do. She searched LinkedIn. She actually got a couple of offers. She made it to final rounds and then did not get the job. And one of the feedback was, you lack experience, or we don't see how you're different from other candidates. She just didn't know how to navigate this with limited experience and kind of not real clarity of the exact kind of role. And this is super common. I mean, this is happening all the time of the kind of students we see. And for Haley, we really honed in on with her, what are those 3 skills? Let's kind of take a look at what that is. So for her, she realized, she's like, I'm highly creative. I've actually done some digital campaigns that I did for my sorority at school. She also had worked with, she also had worked with a small PR firm doing some part-time work where she did some of their press releases and assisted them. And then she also had some classes where she was able to do some analytical, whether it was in group projects and assisting. And by getting her to hone in on her skills and being really clear and the story that she would tell about it, we then said, well, let's take a look at your own alumni. Who from URI had the same major, who's doing a job, and they only graduated maybe in the last 3 to 5 years. I don't need the VP. I want you to talk to someone who's doing a role that's of interest to you. And we call it the 10 and 10 rule. I want you to pick 10 people who are doing the role that look interesting to you and who are spread across maybe 10 different companies. And by really reaching out to alumni, which tend to be very friendly, most alumni are very happy to talk to someone who's reached out, who had a similar major. And she realized that once she started having these conversations with people in industries, this is where everything clicked for her because she had great interpersonal skills. She was able to really do that. And for her, let me see if I can move my thing down. She actually got a great offer before she graduated at TJX as an allocation analyst. So really blending her interest of fashion and retail with her analytical skills. So, it took a little time, right? We started probably in the fall of 24, and maybe she had the offer probably, I think, by maybe March, actually, before she graduated. But it's the following through. And even though it feels uncomfortable to reach out or say things in a certain way. So, we feed them all this scripting and language and just ways to best articulate their value. But that's how it really ended up working for her. Okay. Another example is Matt. Matt graduated from Cornell in 24, and very common of a lot of kids who go to Cornell, as you may know, there's no business school. So they either go for hotel management or they go for industrial labor relations, and they try to kind of piece it together with different classes. And that was very much his case. So he was hospitality, but he really also took a lot of, finance and accounting classes. And he had a really good network. And he was networking. He was speaking to people, whether he knew or family knew, but nothing came of it. And then he was really kind of shocked that he couldn't believe that he went to an Ivy League school and he had connections and it just wasn't enough. And, again, it wasn't clear what he was exactly saying in these conversations, But he was like just stunned that that didn't go his way. But when we dug a little bit deeper, we realized he was kind of all over the place. He would tell me, he's like, well, I want to be in real estate. I want investment banking. I could do sales. I can do strategy. He's like, and I really want to work for a fun product. Okay. I get this a lot. Like, I want to work for something cool or an entertainment or sports. So I'm like, okay, we got a lot going on there. His parents had come to us. He was skeptical of career coaching. He did not think that this was something he necessarily needed. I don't force it, but I think after he learned a little bit more, realized he could use the help. And he was also really common that he chased what I call outfield opportunities. This is when kids are chasing opportunities that look amazing. Maybe they might pay a lot of money, but there's no alignment with their skills or their talents or where they want to be. It's like saying, I want to go be an accountant and work in Alaska, and they're going to make me a lot of money. But, so he was kind of just chasing whatever was in front of him, but he wasn't being true to what he was really talented at. So for Matt, what we looked at is really, honing in his skills and, taking a look at what are the stories that you're telling about your skill. He had great skills. He had internships, demonstrating leadership, his ability, to really analyze data, good communicator. And for him, we really honed in more on the piece where, what are you doing when you're networking? What are you actually saying? And we teach a technique that's called the 3 A's. And the A's are this. The first A is answer. So what answers do you need to better understand that role to help you make a decision whether you even want to do that? Just because you have a networking call doesn't mean you need the job there. The second piece is attitudes. If the person's going to really ultimately think highly of you, what kind of attitude do you want them to have about you? And this is where you want to relay your skills and your skill stories, proving that you've, had leadership opportunities and how you led a group or how he analyzed data and ultimately was able to help achieve an outcome for the employer or the group or the project. And then ultimately, what are the actions? If the person really believes you have these skills, what actions can you ask that person to do? Such as, can you introduce me to someone who's in this kind of role? Or can you introduce me to a hiring manager? Or can you mentor me? And once he understood of how to have a successful networking conversation with real clarity about his skills, we said, go back to these contacts, the ones that nothing really happened with. And when he did that, along with connecting with alumni, that's when things started to click for him, when he was able to really articulate his value and how he could add value. And for him, and I guess I'll call this fun, he got a great job as a strategy and operations associate at FanDuel. So this kind of met all the marks for him. So with him, it was just kind of, really getting him to be more clear, getting him to be more focused about the kind of roles, really getting more into he really decided, I want more operations and analytics as opposed to sales and investment banking and all the other things that he would just put out there. And I think once he was able to really have these highly effective networking conversations, that's what really, hit it for him. I have another one, but I want to come back to this because I want to be mindful of everyone's time, and I want to make sure I cover a couple of points before I break. And if you want me to come back to Juliet and explain her story, I absolutely can. So one of the things that parents will say is, so what can I do? What should I do? What should I not do? What can I do to help my young adult be successful in this process? And it's hard. Look, I think a lot of times we'll say, and again, why don't you just go apply online or go, you should measure how many applications. And I think before all that happens, they really need some clarity on their skills. And sometimes they can't see it for themselves. So for you as a parent to say, you know what, I've noticed that you have a really amazing ability to lead others. I, for example, saw you working in that part-time job or in that project that you told me about. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about maybe that's one of your skills that you don't even realize that you have, and helping them to get clear on what they are good. I really try to narrow it down to three core skills, because more than that, it gets a little fuzzy. And once they start to get clarity on the skill and the story behind it, as I said earlier, the rest of the job search gets easier because you know where you're going. So I think that's a really valuable way to help your kid. Talk about introductions, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier. I am all for introductions, but here's what you need to think about. Try to make introductions for your kid to a colleague at the right time, meaning your young adult has clarity about the kind of role they want. They have comfort in talking about themselves and what they've accomplished. And they are prepped, professional, dressed, like taking it very seriously, even if it's a family friend. As I said, when it comes to business and money, people are not going to go out of their way if they don't think a young adult is really prepared. So just at the right time, I think sometimes parents just offer these connections and introductions too soon, and then the kids kind of blow it. So I love introductions. Just make sure that you do a mock interview with them to make sure that they're ready to go before that happens. Structuring their time and their metrics. I think very often parents will say, well, I just want my kid to make sure that every day they're applying to like 20 jobs every day, 5 days a week or 7 days a week. And I want to just clarify metrics. I like metrics, but I'm going to give you a suggestion of how to offer some metrics. I don't think it's a great measure to say, how many jobs did you apply to today? Because it's so hard as a young adult to get found without having any connection. I don't love that measure. The measure that I like is, tell me how many people, live people, that you have spoken to in a coffee chat, informational interview each day or each week. And the number should be lower, right? But it's almost, I want quality over quantity, because remember, and I'm going to kind of say that people hire people, as we all know. And when the day is done, it doesn't matter how much technology screens people out. Ultimately, there's a person deciding whether they're going to get hired. So really encouraging them to, focus on, who have you networked with? Who are you talking to? Who are you reaching out with to have a conversation with, and measuring that. The other thing about time, and I'll get to that in another page. The other piece is about AI. When I did this, I spoke to the head of campus recruiting at Morgan Stanley. I spoke to the head of campus recruiting at New York Life and Wells Fargo, all in the last week or so. And one of the most common, and of course, and I'm doing this also to learn, I'm trying to understand, where is AI fitting in? So I make sure that we're giving the right guidance. And I'll say the good news is that they're still using people to hire right now, especially in early career. Although there's AI involved in other pieces of other types of roles, they are still doing it all by people, in-person screening for those organizations. But they do want to understand how a student is using AI, and not just to cheat on homework. There's definitely coming up of, tell me how you've used AI in your classwork, or to solve a problem, or to do something creative. How are you using it to analyze information? So the importance of playing around with different platforms and understanding whether it's Grok, Perplexity, OpenAI. I mean, there's so many, but to not think of it only as like, how can I just, do a quick homework assignment? Because by the way, the professors are getting a lot more savvy in knowing when kids are using it. And by the way, employers know when kids have used AI in the resume. It doesn't look good, and it doesn't come across. It's very, very obvious. But they need to understand it a little bit more about how it works, how to get better prompts, how to get better information out of it. So that's going to be a question that comes up. As I said, people hire people. Don't have your kids guess about what a job is. Like, have them talk to somebody about what they think it is. And this is the other thing, and I think maybe it's just a little bit generational, and because of their fragility from the pandemic, they need to persevere, because one email, one call, one follow-up is not going to move the needle in this market. They really need to be persistent. They need to follow up. I always say, follow up every 7 days until you get an answer, yes or no. And one of my favorite phrases to use in those is like, please pardon my persistence. So it shows that you're professional and that you're serious about it. And the last tip, just knowing that we're at the top of the hour, is just some of the mistakes that I've seen parents make is sometimes there's this feeling that you think the school is going to handle everything. Some schools do a better job than others, but your kids really do need to self-advocate. They need to take that initiative on themselves, along with using campus resources. Online job boards are really hard to get hired, especially when they're young and they don't have a lot of experience. People hire people. I'll just say that again. I talked about introductions. Don't make them too early. Be careful sometimes. I know sometimes as parents, we mean well about telling them, like, go do this, or this is the job you should do. Sometimes they need to figure that out on their own. Or if it's something that's really not aligned with their skills, then they're going to end up shifting. So I know it's hard. We want to help. Sometimes I'll speak for myself. I'll say, I may say too much. And this other thing, timing. So my son is a college senior, and would I love for him right now to be actively networking and meeting with people to make sure that he's getting that job when he graduates? Yes. Is he right now? No, because that's not on his schedule or that's not on his time. Does he know how important it is? Yes, but I can't force it. And there's always going to be this little disconnect of our time frame and their time frame, and we have to kind of meet somewhere in the middle of, it's not me. He's going to have to do this, and it might not be on my schedule. So I know sometimes we can do that. I can't even believe I'm going to say this, but it's been in the news recently, not for many of our clients, that parents are showing up to interviews. Parents are calling employers. Parents are writing resumes. Parents are submitting applications. Please don't do it. You're not helping them. I know it sounds crazy, but just like, they need to do it. And by the way, they need to fail. They actually need to go through the process of it not always going great or making some mistakes, because that's how they learn. And I know we want to help, but really try to, if you want to do a mock interview, amazing. You want to read the resume and make sure there's no spelling errors, awesome. Don't do it for them. They have to try to do it. Or, get the book, talk to me, talk to a mentor and a family member who can work with them. And the last piece is, sometimes we just assume they know how to do this and how to look for a job and how to look for an internship. And they honestly don't know. They really don't understand, for all kinds of reasons. They don't understand how this really works. So the more that you can just set the example, give guidance, encourage them to, kind of talk to people, I think that, tends to be the most valuable as well. So I know I want to be mindful. We're a few minutes after the top of the hour. I can share, I don't typically share my slide decks, but I can definitely share the recording. And I'm happy to do that as well. I don't know if there's any other questions, and maybe even, Brian, I can unmute you. So if you wanted to, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to share. I'm going to hit allow to talk on your end.
No, thanks, Beth. Thanks for all
Okay.
your nuggets of wisdom. I know there's a lot to cover in very short time,
Yeah.
but if anybody has questions, I want to highly suggest that you reach out to Beth directly and talk on your own. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I'll just put this here. If you want to learn more, you can scan the QR code. You can call us. You can go to our website, nextgreatstep.com. We have complimentary consultations. Happy to speak. And I'm kind of on all social media and can, find out more about us, but happy to speak. And hopefully this was helpful. And if you ever, if you need anything further, please don't hesitate to reach out.
thank you for today, Beth.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Oh, someone just asked a question. I don't know if you want to stay on about, can you speak about HireVue do's and don'ts? Do you want me to answer that, or do you want me to take it offline?
Go for it. Whoever wants to stay can stay. So go for it,
Okay.
please.
Okay. So this was Lou who asked about HireVue. Really good question. HireVue is something that I actually, a few years ago, when it was becoming popular with the one-way interviews and kids hate it, I reached out to the CEO and I had a conversation. So we actually have the software. So we have HireVue software. We help kids use it, and it's very, very common. And this is something, so not only is it hard for kids to talk to real people, it's hard to speak about yourself with enthusiasm when there's nobody on the other side. So they need to get comfortable talking about themselves. They need to over emote and over smile and be enthusiastic, and nobody's at the other end. And they need to be ready to do this because they are using this as the first screening. A lot of companies, it's a huge money saver. I don't love it. But it is the way of the world. There's no way they can get through all these resumes that are submitted now, especially everyone's using AI resumes. Um, so my tips for HireVue are similar for the tips for on video interviews are the same for in person, but for video interviews, we tell them to dress from head to toe. You put your shoes on. It's a state of mind. So we do, by the way, we do all practice mock interviews and it's all over video. The other thing is you need to be prepared. Guarantee they're going to ask you, tell me about yourself. What do you know about us? And why do you want to work here? Or why should we hire you? So again, these are just being comfortable practicing, whether it's for in-person or a video interview, must be rehearsed. But the difference with also video is you need to make sure, got to have a clean background. I'm telling you, I'm sure you believe me, the messy beds, kids are in their dorm rooms or they put the window behind them so the light is shining and their face looks, more shadowed. So just kind of, you got to test your technology ahead of time, which is another big piece. But you got to really practice talking to a camera. And by the way, not looking at the screen, looking at the camera, which is another big piece. So very similar to regular interviews, but it's happening. Many companies are using it as a major, way to vet. It's kind of really replaced the introductory phone call or, call that they use to determine whether they want to move you forward. So I hope that helps. I actually have I have a blog about how to do video interviews, but yeah, they need to be ready for those just the way they need to do for real interviews, kind of all the same. I don't know if there's any other questions. Hopefully that helps address that. All good. All right. So I'm going to thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And please reach out with any questions. Have a great day.